Hey y'all, welcome back. Today I'm gonna create a quick and simple look as I get ready to go out to meet some friends for dinner. Without further ado, let's get right into this look. So there's really no rhyme or reason as far as the products I chose, the look I'm going for. I just grabbed some stuff that I was very curious to try out. And I've already prepped my skin, so I've done my skincare routine, applied sunscreen. For primers, I used my Jaclyn Cosmetics. This is the Hydrating Under Eye Primer under my eyes. I used my Hourglass Veil eyeshadow primer, and for all over face I used the NYX Plump Right Back Serum primer, and then for my lips I'm just using this Sun Bum Cocoa Balm in Groove Cherry. So the first thing I'm going to be applying today is some concealer, and the concealer I'm going to be using today is the Wet n Wild Mega Last Incognito All Day Full Coverage Concealer in shade Fair Beige. Since this concealer is relatively new to me, I'm just gonna start with a tiny little bit under my eyes and then blend out. Looks kind of brightening, so I'm gonna take a little bit and just some central points of my face to add a little bit of light. To blend my concealer out, I'm gonna use my BK Beauty 8506. This is a concealer. It seems to be drying down pretty quickly, so maybe it's one that you don't want to dot around like I did before you blend it, but we can make it work. Feels like this would be a good match for the overall tone of my neck. For my face though, since I do have quite a bit of surface redness, I also wanted to test out the L'Oreal Age Perfect 4-in-1 Tinted Balm in the shade 20 Fair. This looks a lot darker than my skin tone, and if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the lighter shades. So I'm gonna focus this on areas where I have a lot of redness, and then I've heard that it does best when blended out with your fingers. So I'm going to press and pull and blend this out. For my overall complexion, I'm going to be using a powder foundation. So I don't like to build up powder foundations to where they are super opaque or full coverage. I like to do a little bit of evening out with concealers or more sheer complexion products before I apply a powder foundation on top. This is blending in very, very nicely, and then once it's blended out and kind of melted into the skin, the shade is not looking too dark after all. It's quite nice. I think it gives a nice kind of bouncy feeling to the skin. It looks like right through my upper mustache area. I'm looking a little white, means I got a little too much sunscreen right there, but that's okay. We can always fix things. This is looking really nice. Yeah, you can't really, I mean, there's no really, you can't see this on the skin. It's looking like my skin, but perfected. It's making pores look a little bit smoother, and it just melts right in. That's really lovely. That's nice. This is gonna definitely be a product I need to test out as like an all-over foundation to see how it does. But yeah, this L'Oreal Age Perfect Tinted Balm in 20 Fair, that's looking really nice on the skin. For powder foundation, I'm going to be trying this one out from Fenty Beauty. This is the Pro Filt'r Soft Matte Powder Foundation, and I have shade 160. I worry that this might be a little too dark, but I'm going to use a big fluffy brush and hope for the best. I have had this in, like you can see, I've only ever swatched this, and this has been in my collection since shortly after it launched. And I don't know, I always thought the shade looked a little dark. Oh, that's a little dark. I was always apprehensive to use it. I never made the time to go to a Sephora and find a better shade match. Okay, worn sheer, I could make this work. So I'm applying this like I do other powder foundations. I've done a video, and it's one of my videos that performs quite well on my channel, and that's how to apply powder foundation for beginners. And I always like to kind of stipple it or place on your crumb coat and then buff and smooth everything in. This is also looking really, really nice. My ears are feeling a little red, so I'm going to tone those down. I want a little bit more coverage out here on the cheeks, or a little bit right through here, just to knock back that white cast from my sunscreen. The brush I'm using is the BK Beauty number 105. This is, I believe it's called the Large Buffer. It's the newest BK Beauty brush to my collection, and I really enjoy it. Like all BK Beauty brushes, it's really, really soft. and it cleans up extremely well. Here is the powder foundation. Very, very nice. I want to brighten up some of the center points of my face a little bit more. So I'm going to use my Laura Geller Baked Balance and Brighten Powder Foundation in the shade Porcelain. And I'm going to use this almost as like a matte highlighter. And I'm going to add some light towards the center portions of my face. And this little brush I'm using is the e.l.f. highlight brush. This is such a wonderful brush for highlighting, or like I'm using now, applying powder in a smaller area. This Laura Geller powder foundation is just such a beautiful product. I was finally able to check out the shades in store, and Porcelain is still my best bet. Fair pulls a little too warm and light is just too dark, but this one is just such a standout in the world of powder foundations. It has definitely replaced the MAC Studio Fix finish as my kind of holy grail powder foundation. That being said, they are very different. This does not offer as much coverage, in my opinion, as the MAC, but I find it's more lightweight on the skin. It melts in a little bit easier, and it feels really good on the skin. And it's very, very smoothing. I'm gonna continue with that e.l.f. highlighting brush, and I'm gonna highlight my skin. I'm gonna be using a product from Chanel, Poudre Luminaire in number 40 White Opal. And it's really nice, kind of white duochrome shifty highlight. Really beautiful shade. It has some reflex of green, yellow, pink, and purple, which keeps this highlight from looking too icy on the skin. It definitely leans cool tone, but it's almost like a opalescent white gold shade. And finding a really nice cool or neutral cool highlight is very, very difficult because a lot of highlights pull warm. Finding something that has that element of a cool undertone without feeling too icy, too stark, or too glittery, sparkly, it's really, really nice. And I like this highlight that it adds light, it adds dimension, but it never emphasizes texture. And I always like to put a little bit of highlight right here into the temples, because as we get older and our face loses volume, this area tends to kind of give our age away, because when we're young and we have a lot of facial fat, this area tends to be a little bit more plush looking. So adding a little bit of highlight will just catch the light and make this area look a little bit fuller and bouncy. I'm gonna use a little bit of bronzer, so I'm gonna use my BK Beauty number 103 bronzer brush and the Flower Beauty Heat Wave Luminous Bronzer in Sunrise, one of my favorites. And I just like to tap the side of my brush, pat it off. I'm gonna go kind of high and towards the back and then buff. Here in Toronto, it is quite chilly, in my opinion. So I'm gonna wear a sweater out to dinner tonight, which excites me because I love autumn and I love autumn clothing. I want to add a little bit of bronzer because that will just help kind of pull in that touch of warmth that we find a lot in autumn, especially if you look over to like seasonal color palettes. Autumn along with spring are the two warm palettes of the seasonal color analysis seasons, and autumn colors in makeup tend to have a little bit more of a warmth to them. They're a little bit more warm, orangey red in their undertones. Autumn compared to spring though tends to be a little bit more muted, a little bit more saturated. So if you think about a spring orange being more kind of corally or more of like a clementine, autumn would be a little bit more rusty or like a clay color. And this bronzer I really enjoy because it almost has an element of like a warm pinkiness, but it's very sheer, it's very easy to build up, and it gives just the perfect amount of color that will give my skin warmth without looking orange or muddy. I'm also gonna take a little bit onto the neck. For blush, I couldn't make up my mind, so I'm gonna mix two different ones. The first I'm using is from a Korean brand called 3CE, and this is the face blush in City Mauve. And I'm gonna use my favorite IT Cosmetics French Boutique blush brush. And I'm gonna start with this shade kind of higher up on the cheek, overlapping my blush placement, working it back into the hairline and pulling forward. This is a really beautiful, soft mauve pink. It has a little bit more of a neutral tone. I wouldn't call this a full-on cool tone because it is picking up a little warm, but it's very nice. It's a very kind of wearable cool tone that isn't gonna feel too icy or stark on the skin, because those really true cool tone colors are rather difficult to work with for a lot of people within makeup and even clothing, because they are so icy. They have so much, they're so bold that very few people can work them into a makeup routine or makeup look without it feeling like it's taking overall the entire look. So having a little bit of a neutrality to some of your cooler tone products will make it just a lot more wearable. It's really pretty. I like that. So the other blush I'm going to use is a blush from the brand Ramon, also a K-beauty brand, and this is the Better Than Cheeks blush in 03, if I'm not mistaken. That is Blueberry Chip, and this is a little bit brighter. You can see it definitely has a little bit more of a white base to it. So I'm going to use a very small amount of this. I'm going to take it right here on the front of the cheek. Whatever I have left over, I just like to work it into the other areas of my face where I've added color. So I always like to add color to the temple, into the forehead. That way it kind of mimics that natural flush of color that I get. A little bit on my nose and a little bit on my chin. And then what if I have left over from there, I'm just gonna work it into the bronzer I applied on my neck to keep everything feeling cohesive. For eyes, I'm gonna use a cream shadow as like a little bit of a base color. This is an Eyes to Mesmerize from Charlotte Tilbury in the shade Pillow Talk. And this is quite a saturated pigment. So I like to pick up a teeny tiny bit with my fingers, start on the lash line, and then I'm gonna bring this right up to the socket. It's gonna add a little bit of depth. This Pillow Talk shade is quite a nice kind of earthy pink. It is a little bit warmer. I feel like a lot of Charlotte Tilbury products skew warm, but this pink, it's more of a neutral, and depending on what you pair it with, it can either pull a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler. I'm gonna take a clean BK Beauty A503 and just blend around the perimeter of that shadow, make sure everything is going where I want it. And you can definitely build up the shadow to be a little bit more intense. I want a soft wash of really beautiful nothingness. For eyeshadow, I'm gonna be using the MAC x9 in Dusty Rose. I'm gonna start off with this kind of first shade on the second row. This is a slightly warmer pink, and this is called Fabulous DNA. And I'm gonna be using a BK Beauty A504, and I'm gonna start with this right under the arch of the brow. I want to have a little bit of a smokiness in today's look, but not too much. So I'm just going to start by working this shade here at the arch of the brow, and I'm going to gradually get darker as I go down to the lash line. It's going to be very much like a smoky but natural effect. I'm going to go to the next shade in the palette, which is called Pleasing to the Eye. And I'm gonna use a BK Beauty A502. Tilt my chin up, look down, and I'm gonna work this into the socket, working it right over towards the bridge of my nose. And then when I have less of my brush, I'm gonna work it into this outer fourth of my eyelid. I'm gonna go back to the BK Beauty A503, and I'm just gonna blend those together. Taupey shade here on the bottom called Cool Compliment. And I'm gonna use the BK Beauty A502 again. And with this shade, I'm gonna just kind of rub it right at my lash line. And as I get less product on my brush, I'm gonna kind of put a little bit more pressure on the brush. That way it fans out, and I'm gonna cover the lower half of my eyelid. So I'm looking tense right now. Don't worry, we are gonna blend over it. Use my A503 again and blend back and forth over that shade. I'm gonna angle my brush up at 45 degrees, so up like this. That way it's going to push the shadow further up the lid, creating more of a smoky base. Last shade on the middle row, and this is actually a permanent color called Sable, one of my favorite MAC eyeshadows of all time. Use my BK Beauty A501. I'm gonna load that up on the side of the brush, tilt my chin up, and then I'm gonna work this right over the eyelid. And I'm just gonna stripe it on, back to my A503, and now I'm gonna blend. I just wiped my A502 on a microfiber, and I'm gonna mix together the first two shades that we applied, and I'm just going to buff that right over the perimeter of that shadow. That way it blends out a little bit more. And then I'm gonna take my A503 and I'm gonna use a little bit of my Laura Geller powder foundation again. And I'm gonna use this right on the very edge of that shadow. And this will help to kind of transition it and fade the color out. But it'll also give you this really lovely kind of smokiness, because this way you're actually making your shades kind of fade into the rest of the skin tone. I'm gonna go back to my A504, a little bit of my Chanel highlighter, and I'm gonna work this right here on the inner corner of the eye. That way, what I use on my eyes is mirroring what is on my face. For eyebrows, I'm gonna use my Kosas Air Brow in the shade Gray. I really love this brow gel, but I find it has a lot of product on it. So I just wipe off the excess onto a tissue. And then after I do one brow, I always like to use a clean spoolie brush. This is my favorite spoolie, the Eyebrow Duo brush from e.l.f. Lips are pretty simple. I'm gonna use my Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk lip pencil right over that lip balm. And then for lip color, I'm gonna use a MAC lipstick. This is a satin lipstick in the shade Faux. I like to really rub and work this into the lips, give it a little bit of a blot, and make it more of a stain. For gloss, I'm gonna use a little bit of the NYX This Is Milky Gloss in Ube Milkshake. I cannot get over how just decadent this lip gloss formula is. It is so creamy and pillowy on the lips. The scent is absolutely divine, and it has a decent stay power. I really love this. And I feel like I want a little bit more blush, so I want a little bit more color, so I'm gonna go into this Tom Ford Shade Illuminate Duo. I've had this for a while. I still don't get the hype because I feel like there's better colors, but this color duo, it's a little bit more of a warmer pink and a cooler pink mixed together, and I feel like it will give the look just what I need. I am in the mood today to use a finishing powder. I'm going to use my all-time favorite finishing powder. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Charlotte's Genius Magic Powder. For under eye and face, I have shade 1. BK Beauty 105 brush. Just like I apply powder foundation, I'm going to stamp this all over, and I like to pick up a little bit more, really work it into my brush, and then I'm going to go through and buff. I'm going to add a little bit of finishing spray, and whenever I use a powder foundation or a lot of powder products, I like to use a glycerin-based spray, since glycerin is a humectant to take away any of that powdery residue. Here is my face before setting spray. Got powder on. I do look more matte than normal, but I look very smooth, very perfected. Now I'm gonna take my MAC Fix Plus. I'm gonna take a damp beauty sponge and just gently press that over. Ramon Han All Fix Mascara, my new holy grail mascara that I discovered this year. And for me, it just doesn't get better than this. The color is called Ash, and it is the perfect taupey grayish brown mascara. In my very last step, which is not makeup, but it is a fragrance. This is the newest fragrance to my collection. I cannot recall where I heard about it, but I smelled it in Ulta. I was like, let me think about it. I came home, ran to Sephora and bought it, because 3 days later, I still could not get it off my mind. This is the Nomad fragrance from Glowy. It is just the most beautiful fragrance. There's something bright to it. I believe it has a little bit of a mossy note to it, which keeps it feeling quite grounded, quite earthy, but it also has a little bit of this kind of brightness that's almost cheery, and it has a touch of a floral, almost like a little bit of like a slightly more jasmine or gardenia note to it. It doesn't have that same kind of pungency that a rose does, but it has that little bit of a brighter scent to it. It's a very musk forward scent, so it almost kind of smells like a natural kind of skin scent, but that's been elevated. That's been made almost like natural skin, but sexy. I really love this, and I would say next time you're out at a store that has fragrances, give the Glowy Nomad a sniff. It is just divine. That is going to wrap up this video. I am gonna head out and drive downtown and meet up with my friends for dinner, and then come home, because tomorrow we are heading back home. home to Virginia to help out for another 2 weeks. I will see you all in the next video. Take care of yourself wherever it is you are in the world, and I will see you later. Bye, y'all.